All right, everyone, welcome back. We are starting our panel, Building the Business Case for Machine Learning Platforms. And I'm excited to welcome up our panelists, Divya Jain, Director of Machine Learning Platform at Adobe, Kirk Bourne, Principal Data Scientist and Executive Advisor at Booz Allen Hamilton, and I believe our third panelist, Justin Norman, VP of Data Science at Yelp, may be having technical difficulties, and we will bring him on as soon as he is available. So we're here to really talk about a couple of things. I think building the business case, spans building the business case for machine learning as a whole. Although many organizations are beyond that at this point. One of the challenges that comes up, as you mature in your use of machine learning and data science more broadly, is the projects themselves, getting the data labeled, hiring the talent is so expensive. You have to balance, how do you support the teams you have in place versus the investments in the projects themselves? And really those are the topics that we want to explore, or at least a starting place for this exploration into building the business case. I'd like to start by having each of our panelists introduce themselves, say a few words about their background. Before I do that, for this panel and the remaining panels of the day, we do want to keep them interactive. If you have a question that you'd prefer to type, you can type it in the chat, and I will make sure that it gets to our panelists. If you would like to voice your question, use the raise hand function, and we will identify you and bring you on via voice to ask your question. Divya, tell us a little bit about your role and background.
Yeah. Hi, good morning, Sam. Good morning, everyone. I'm Divya, and I'm the director of Adobe's ML platform. So Adobe actually is not known as one of the companies which has a lot of ML going on, but even though the marketing may not be there, I can say it right here that actually Adobe, given the creative suite and all the document suite that it actually has a very big ML footing in the industry. So the platform goal that I lead is to really democratize AI and ML across Adobe. So there are a lot of different pockets, and how do we really build an ecosystem, build on top of each other, and make it faster to market is what the goal of this particular platform is. Now, I have joined Adobe about 3 years back, almost 3 years. Before that, I was in different startups and big companies, and most of the time I have been associated with ML projects, starting them from scratch because this is a new space. Everywhere people are just trying to get into there. So I have some experience and background as to how to get the project started and make it meaningful.
Thanks, Divya. Kirk?
I think
Unmute, that's good. Lessons learned. So thank you, Sam. Really great to be here. It's early afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States, so it's great to be part of this. I congratulate you on pulling this together because the whole focus on platforms in AI is going to be like the sort of the revolutionary step that businesses need to take. So as we're moving beyond sort of evolutionary, digital transformation to the real digital disruption we've talked about for years. So currently I'm the principal data scientist and an executive advisor at Booz Allen Hamilton. So Booz Allen Hamilton is one of the largest providers of data analytics and AI services to the federal government. So 70% of our work, of our 27,000 employees, is focused on federal government support. The other 30% is commercial, but primarily focused in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity now is waking up to the fact that AI and machine learning are essential to identifying anomalies in network behavior. And we've certainly seen a lot of examples of ransomware and data breaches and other kinds of things happening in the last year, which is pretty scary. So we're all about bringing AI and those kind of services to our clients across the federal spectrum, with healthcare, military, social services, you name it, transportation, energy. We're doing those things. And that sort of ties into sort of my role at the company. So my background, my far background is astrophysics. So I have a PhD in astrophysics from Caltech. And I spent 20 years of my professional career doing astrophysics at NASA, always supporting data systems. So I always tell people I was doing data during the day as my functional role in data at night as an astronomer, though most astronomy isn't done at night anymore. It's done with remote telescopes. Anyway, so I was working with data all the time. And then about 20 years ago, I had that sort of transformative moment where I realized there's a whole lot more you can do with data than just analyze it. And so that whole machine learning data science world opened up to me, and I started doing that a lot and became more convinced that the world needed a whole workforce around data. So about 18 years ago, I left NASA and went to George Mason University. They hired me as professor of astrophysics because I was an astrophysicist, but I actually never taught an astrophysics course. We helped start the world's first data science degree program, undergraduate degree program. There was already a graduate program in informatics, which essentially is data science. So I did that for quite a few years, taught students across a wide variety of disciplines. So there were some astronomy students that I advised, but also finance students, and climate science students, and a variety of things. So I always found pleasure in bringing solutions, models, data analysis, data insights across multiple disciplines, not just astronomy. Though that was my first love, starting at 9 years old.
That's awesome.
So I really like to bring it to many places. And so 6 years ago, Booz Allen came calling and said, how would you like to do what you're doing across a whole variety of different verticals and sectors? And I said, sign me up for that. So I've been at Booz Allen for 6 years doing that. Just last year was named their first data science fellow, which basically means I get to talk to you guys and speak at conferences. I'm very active on social media. I hope to write a book someday. But anyway, it's all about bringing value from data. And that's the bottom line for us throughout the work that we do.
Thanks so much, Kirk. Justin?
Hi, everyone. And thanks to Sam and the TWiML team for having me here. My name is Justin Norman, and currently I'm responsible for the data science function at Yelp. And so that role actually breaks down into a couple of dimensions, which I think are relevant here. I do manage a set of product data science teams, which of course use inference and experimentation for our product decision-making and product development lifecycle. So that's a large portion of the role. Additionally, I have a data product organization, so that is much more platform and tools oriented and focused. And so my responsibility there is to build enabling technologies for those that are going to utilize the machine learning and AI and data science capabilities we have at Yelp, both internally and externally. So what's really beneficial about this role, and I think is really exciting and has been, is that we are both developing ML systems for use in our development cycle, so from an engineering perspective, and also developing ML systems and inference capabilities externally to be shared with the public, and also as a part of our consumer platform. So that's the scope of the role. From my background, I actually did start my career in the Marine Corps after going to the Naval Academy and studying CS. And during that time, I spent a lot of time, with the synthesis of information, presentation of information for, a variety of different applications. But for the most part, spent a lot of time synthesizing data around environments and lots of streaming applications before that came in. So moved on there. I have a variety of roles in machine learning and AI research, as well as engineering and product. And so just happy to be here to share my perspective.
Thanks so much, Justin. I guess the first question I have is to validate my premise. I opened this up by saying that, hey, we're kind of beyond this phase where we need to understand making the business case for machine learning as a whole. Organizations understand the importance of that to a large degree. And now it's about how do we how do we allocate investments between the projects themselves and the platforms and tools and teams that support those projects. Do you as a panel agree with that? What's your experience been with that, Justin?
You know, I think it definitely still varies depending on the maturity of the organization. But as we're seeing some of the organizations that have made these multi-year, probably 7- and 8-figure investments, certainly I think it is. And I think one of the most important things now is, can it be measured? Not so much, you know, should we be doing this, yes or no? I think everybody recognizes there's value, but every investment now that I'm seeing, especially in my role now, is being scrutinized at the same level that any other product level investment or engineering level investment would be. And so that's leading to some different conversations.
Mm-hmm. Kirk, how about the customers that you work with?
Well, the sort of the bottom line is always about the mission. And so that's sort of one of my core beliefs, is that we really need to be sort of like end focused, outcome focused, mission focused. And so in doing so, that sort of in a sense aligns what you do to what you're ultimately trying to achieve. I so often over the years have heard that people say that they're data first or technology first, or data driven, technology driven. And I think the person you previously interviewed, Sam, I hope people will rewatch that interview if they missed what just preceded this panel from Fran Bell. She was talking about, you know, that focus on outcomes first really drives the organization in the right direction, as opposed to just saying, hey, we got these cool tools, we got these cool technologies, or we have this big pile of data, let's do something, you know. And so it does help to sort of build the advocacy across the organization. But another sort of way that Fran Bell described it, and I also like to describe it, is that think big but start small. So think big is the mission focus, and start small is what you do. So you build those small incremental products and services and around AI and data and machine learning that will build advocacy across the organization, which then builds people's willingness to take those risks, to do the bigger things. But you got to start with those smaller things to show people that it's not just the data science kids on the block are going to come and take over the business, and they're going to get all the money and they're going to get all the accolades. It's really about the whole business succeeding as a team. And then I really truly believe the team sport. This is a team sport concept. I mean, I always tell people that if you take all the best, you know, the 11 best quarterbacks from the National Football League and put them on the field as your offense, you're going to lose, right? Because you need a lot more than 11 of the same kind of people. All right. So having a diversity of perspectives, and diversity of skills, and diversity of business units that you belong to and report to really build that success. But again, it's building that advocacy first by starting small while thinking big.
Got it. Now, Divya, you lead a team focused entirely on platforms. How does this play out for you? Do you spend a lot of your time helping others in the broader organization understand the importance of those investments?
Yeah, no, so the way, and I'll agree with what Kirk and was saying earlier, is that it is a team effort. And I think having that kind of a view with the product teams, that it is just an enabling technology. It's not something separate, or, you know, it's not an additional thing. It's not an add-on, but it's a core technology that is needed to deliver this particular feature or product to our customers. Then it becomes a, you know, people understand the importance of it, and then putting resources on it or building the tools or technology around that particular thing start to make sense. When we put that as something, you know, different, or we put it something additional needed for getting that particular feature out, then all the other challenges start to come with it. Like, where do we get resources from? Where do we get funding from? So now at Adobe, like the way Adobe is structured is that there are a lot of different teams and a lot of different product groups that are actually trying to get ML out. Now, if we don't have a centralized platform, then everybody will be duplicating some of the work that we all are doing. So rather than having every product build their own stack, build their own data collection pipelines, building their own operational team, centralizing that kind of an effort does make sense at the overall organization. So I think the main over here, the goal was even going across the business units and not just limited to one particular business unit. And that kind of really takes the value to a completely different level.
Divya, continue on to talk a little bit about the measuring the impact of these investments when you're talking about a particular model and the impact that that's having on a product. Even that is hard, and we'll be talking about that later. But then when you talk about the, platforms and teams that enable that model to be created, how are you measuring the impact of the team that you run?
Yeah, so that's a very good question because I think that is one of my goals. Like to really, how do I really take out that value or the KPIs that I can show that this team is important enough for the business, right? Like it's not just about talking points; it's also about really showing that value to everyone on how. So the way we started, instead of measuring the value by saying one model, right? Like that, how is that model making an impact? The idea was to look at some of the other KPIs, like how much time did it take for something that was done by the research group to actually really take it out to production. Like if it earlier was taking about 6 months to 9 months of one of those models going out, if it reduced to 3 months, right there is a value that this particular platform is bringing in, right? Or the same model, if it was incorporated in 2 different places, doing, with a little bit of a tuning, then that's the value, because you now have deduplicated the work instead of 2 teams developing the same thing. So really thinking about how you are measuring those impact, that becomes important. So platform really means that you're enabling other people, and enablement of other people really means that you are making it easier for them to do certain things. So that's how we were measuring our impact, like how quickly was a particular feature gone from a concept into the hands of the user. And if that cycle is reduced, then definitely you're bringing a value to the overall business.
Great. So we've got some attendee questions coming in, and please continue to get those questions in. We want you to get your questions answered from our panelists. By all means, let us know if you'd like to voice your questions. But I'll ask this first one from Thomas Paula. And this comes up all the time with so many tools and solutions available for building ML platforms. How do you start to think about the spectrum of build buy and the various points in between? Kirk, any thoughts on that one?
Well, I haven't done too much in building or buying, but I do believe in this sort of agile approach again, where you start small. I'm going to keep repeating myself, but that's sort of that DevOps concept where you do the experimentation, right? So you build something or buy something or some combination, and you see what's working, you see what's delivering value, and again that helps reduce sort of or I should say increase tolerance for risk if the company is going to invest in building or buying. And so the platforms that exist now are great. I mean, I don't want to say that it's the end all solution, but a lot of businesses now can just get right into AI and machine learning through existing cloud services. So I would say right now, just don't build at all. I would say to a lot of companies who are trying to get started with this, because there's any number of services available on the cloud service providers. I mean, machine learning through computer vision, if you need to do facial recognition or any kind of object recognition, for example, supply chain or logistics, just use a service, an object detection computer vision service. Same thing with natural language processing. You can actually just use it, call an API to build a conversational bot for your customer service, right? And so all you really need is that push 0 button that Fran Bell was talking about in the previous talk, which said when the AI gets stuck, make sure there's an outlet where you can get a human in the loop real fast. And so a lot of these sort of things exist. And so I think I would focus on doing what's right for your business, obviously. But if you want to get started right away, don't build it, buy it, and then incrementally see how much you need to add to it that's going to be unique to your organization.
Panels are always best when there's a little bit of controversy.
Yeah,
And I think
go.
you might have sparked off the first
Oh,
one, Justin.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it controversy. I would maybe call it expanding the window a little bit. So I think what Kirk is talking about is really useful for prototyping, and for developing a minimum viable product or ROI, sort of rough order of magnitude. For a bit of perspective, Yelp's got at any given time about 17 million users that are all generating pixelated events constantly in stream. And so if you start to do some of the matrix math here, we're talking about trillions of different events that we've got to provide inference for some of our recommendation systems. So the reality of that is from an API or cloud services perspective, you've got a couple of challenges with using something right off of the shelf. The first is actually data ingest and processing. So being able to handle that many events and then apply the right enrichment with the level of granularity that's necessary sometimes just isn't available out of the box. There's a lot of modification required to existing tools and technologies to make that happen. And it's expensive. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. So there's an evaluation about whether or not your team is best positioned to do that with existing engineering resources investment, or if you're going to make a partnership with one of these vendors who do this sort of work really well, but are going to require a deeper relationship with you. On the other side of it, when we're talking about deploying and then actually scoring results and providing that back to the user, the time horizon becomes really important. You start to worry about things that otherwise weren't a part of the machine learning pipeline, like networking, like latency, like the UI presentation. These are things that otherwise weren't necessarily top of mind. And that can also be really challenging because these are also external vendors which have a very specific way in which they want you to do these things. So one way that we've tried to approach this that's been moderately effective is to think about the ML platform as a whole as a product, right? So when you're deploying a recommendation system, or a map system or anything else that you might think of in an app, you don't think of all the components in that as something you just get from a vendor and then present to your users. It's a slew or a whole platform portfolio of different capabilities working together to deliver an experience. And so when you think of the platform, the machine learning platform, as one of those products, it allows you to bring together design thinking, allows you to bring together FP&A, strategy, machine learning engineering, data science, all the different functions, as both of them have talked about before, Divya and Kirk, brings the team to bear and apply their expertise and actually help you evaluate which tools are best for that phase. And so I think that's how we've been able to kind of take it from maybe a single vendor solution at the beginning to a multi-vendor solution over a longer time horizon with a lot bigger of a scale.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with Justin at all that in terms of our delivery to big clients, that's exactly the approach. But there are small businesses out there who probably can't start that way, which is where I think starting with those, buying the services first and then going big. But for big organizations, yeah, I think what Justin's described is there's so many components that are going to be unique to your business. You're just going to have to, go through that whole design process of what works for us and works for our clients.
Mm-hmm. Divya, a question in from Alexandra asking about this idea of centralization versus distributed and embedded. And in her question, she draws parallels between what's happening with DevOps and the way folks are thinking about reorganizing or organizing engineering organizations. How do you think about that for your organization and at Adobe?
Yeah, no, that's always a good challenge and a good, like that's always a debate that is always happening between the teams, right? Like, what does the centralized operations or centralized team, like, is it bringing more, is it blocking? Is it like becomes a dependency, or is it really, making it faster? I think it really depends on the businesses and how the teams are structured. I really don't think that it's like this is the way to go. For us, I definitely feel it makes sense to have one big ML platform, given that there is a lot we can do when we have an ecosystem. Also, there are a lot of hard problems that we have to solve in this space right now. Like, it's not just about the models, it's about how the data is being transitioned from the storage, it is coming together, how it's the training is happening. Then what does it mean to keep it up to date at all the time? Now, like all of those problems, it's not that it is solved. So having like multiple people solving it again and again, at least at this point, doesn't make a lot of like it feels like having one place which is looking into this problem holistically, like Justin was saying, and then having everybody take it from there and really use it seems like a better option at this point, given that this field is not standardized. There are a lot of options out there. So, and there's a lot of different ways to solve the same problem. So do we want to do that, or do we want to have a concentrated effort? So that's the idea. So that is why it maybe makes more sense to have more centralized operations at this point. And then when things become very standard and available and everything is there, then maybe having separate teams might be a better option. But yeah, that's how I would think about it.
In my Wednesday keynote at the conference with Faisal Siddiqui of Netflix, we got into a really interesting conversation around this area and the role between standardization in a platform and innovation, and and how standardization impacts innovation and how you're always shifting that line. Justin, do you wrestle with that as well at Yelp?
100%. I mean, as Divya was talking, I was thinking about our own journey in this space, and I think we've done a lot of the same things. So I agree, with the centralization of the platform and that being a jumping off point. But the challenge is that the product teams and people who are a little bit closer to the business, and as well as the science teams, want to be able to sort of move quickly and utilize the newest techniques and capabilities to get to their moments of efficacy. So what we've been able to try to play with, I think recently, that's been pretty effective, is to have a different structure for those different types of teams. So our platform is centralized, especially for machine learning. There really is, to get to production, only a couple of ways to go, which is very well maintained and has a very long roadmap. But as I mentioned before, the engineering teams and the science teams are actually verticalized. They're associated with their own product organizations. So if you're a consumer data scientist, you are working on consumer problems. You have that domain experience. You have that that specific background, and you're working probably on a different set of tools, techniques rather. So you're probably much more interested in recommendation systems and classification tasks, right? And then, probably a little less deep learning. And then on the business teams where there's a lot of image analysis going on, the TensorFlow pipeline is something that appears. And so that group has a completely different set of requirements. So our approach is to give flexibility once the toolkit is defined to how the projects are actually organized and developed themselves, to give the product management and product organization teams the ability to sort of do that design and innovation themselves rather than trying to control that.
Mm-hmm. And Justin, to Kirk's earlier point, at some point on the spectrum, there's, hey, you're small enough to just pick something up off the shelf and use it. There's another point on the spectrum where, no one's doing anything like what you're doing and you have to build everything yourself. Do you have a sense for, like, just beyond that, use something totally off the shelf, like how you get to, how you get to centralization and building a process and make efficient transitions through that spectrum?
Yeah, I think the start small capability that's been talked about earlier is the right approach or on ramp to it. I think what's really important with what Divya has been saying as well is that when you start to build these centralized functions for platform teams, to allow them to have the relationship with these sort of smaller teams who've been doing prototyping, observe what's going well, what is actually right for our automation, and then begin to build those into the roadmap. So really, you have something that's captured, inside of your organization that you don't normally get in the real world, which is direct observation of user behavior. And so you actually have an advantage to be able to say, okay, I actually know what works here. What we need to do is scale that, versus actually, we don't do this super well as an organization. Maybe we should go buy that someplace and continue to invest in that when we want to be more effective.
I think I just want to add to what Justin was saying. The other way to think about it is like, even for any of the software related projects, like we always have a system that is it's not that every team have their own systems, right? Like in an organization, you would normally have, okay, this is how you write code, or this is how you take it to the production, right?
Or
So
CI/CD, yeah.
yeah, right. So then, and there will be backend teams, there will be database teams, but there's still some consistency across this development. So why for ML we would not want that kind of a consistency, because it just helps you with governance, with security, because it's not just POC. When you're taking something to production, there's a lot of other functions and requirements and things that come with it that has to be done. And if everybody is doing it in their own way, it just is it's not going to scale at some point for the organization. So we should always try to also see, yes, there is a big innovation side of things, we need to enable that, but then there is a side of really taking it to the in the hands of customer, and that needs some kind of, you know, conformity to it, some kind of consistency across the different teams.
Awesome. Thanks, Divya. That is a great place to wrap up. I'd like to thank all of you for sharing your insights with us. Everyone, we're about to go on a 5-minute break, and we'll be back for the next session momentarily. Thanks so much to our panelists.
Thank you, everyone. It was great. Thank you.